Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how are you doing this week?
Doing great. Happy 2021, Eric. How are you?
Yes, this is our first podcast of the new year. So far, things are going well. We're starting out where 2020 left off, but there's a lot more hope in the air. And with any luck, that'll continue.
Absolutely. The vaccines are coming out and things are moving. We're one day closer to being better. So that's the way it is.
Exactly. So this week, our special guest is Bruce Deckert, who is publisher of Today Magazine. And we're going to talk to Bruce about his path to publisher, the state of media, and we'll see where the conversation goes. So, Bruce, welcome.
Eric, thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And just looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, now I think it's
background, Bruce. I mean, basically, I know you work for the Journal Register company with the Britain Herald and have spent a lot of time over at ESPN. Want to give us some highlights as far as how you got from point A to point B?
Sure. So I worked in media for 25 years. I've lived here in the Farmington Valley in Simsbury for the same time frame. And most of that 25 years, I was an editor just down the road in Bristol at ESPN.com. That was from 99 till about 2016, 2017. Before that, I worked for the Journal Register company, which owned, initially I worked for the Imprint newspaper group. Imprint was owned by JRC, Journal Register company at that time. The Imprint group covered 9 or 10 towns here in Greater Hartford, including almost the entire Farmington Valley. And there was a dedicated weekly newspaper for basically every town in the valley. There was Simsbury News, Avon News, Farmington News, Canton News, and then there were several other towns in Greater Hartford. And so that was my first journalism job here in Connecticut was with Imprint. I was with JRC for several years. I moved to the Bristol Press. Then I moved on to become the Sunday edition editor for the Sunday paper that was put out jointly by the Bristol, New Britain, and Middletown JRC papers. And then from there, I learned about the opportunity at ESPN and moved across town from Bristol, and then, New Britain, moved across town to the, from more of a local journalism focus to the proverbial worldwide leader in sports. And there, there's a backstory there, but in any event, worked at ESPN for about 17 years. And then there's a backstory, of course, to how I segued to this current venture. And so I've moved from, focusing on local journalism with Imprint, again, working for the the self-proclaimed proverbial worldwide leader in sports. And now I've segued back to a community journalism, local journalism focus. And it has really been invigorating. When I was at ESPN, my primary role there was as an editor. And I believe I have a good set of editing skills. I want to keep fine-tuning and improving and enhancing them. But I had to set aside the writing component and the reporting component, which is more rewarding. Writing is harder work, but it's more rewarding. There's a creative aspect when you write that isn't there necessarily when you're editing. And so it was sad for me to leave that aside. I had some good success writing and page design when I worked in newspapers at JRC. Had to set that aside at ESPN, and I've been able to get back and kind of bring that skill set more into play here with Today Magazine. And so we've already won several awards, and I hope I'm not going to sprain my arm, patting myself on the back, but it's really encouraging. It's kind of like if you're in school, in high school or college, and you turn in your paper and you get an A. I mean, that's encouraging, And so, we've won a few awards, and it's something that I really feel good about the news we've been covering here with Today Magazine, and want to keep moving forward here in 2021. So thanks again for the opportunity to be here. Hope that wasn't too lengthy an explanation, but in any event, there you go.
Yeah. Now you just meant you were talking about imprint and, where each town had its own newspaper. And unfortunately, that's a trend that's gone by the wayside. Most towns don't have access to a local news source anymore. There are some smaller ones on the web, but tell us a little bit about what Today Magazine is and how that's really focusing on that community reporting.
Sure. Yeah. And so one of the reasons I launched Today Magazine a few years ago is because I looked around at the media landscape here in the Farmington Valley. And I remembered, of course, 25 years ago when I worked at Imprint, and there were about really 8 or 9 different newspapers that covered the Valley. And until Today Magazine, until we launched this magazine, there were basically 2. There was a newspaper, or 3, I should say. There was at the time, it was a weekly paper. Now it's a biweekly. Then there was also a monthly magazine, and there was a quarterly magazine that covered the Farmington Valley. So we went from about 25 years ago, 8 or 9 different newspapers that covered the Farmington Valley, down to 3. I looked at that landscape and I thought, I think there's a place at the table for bringing community journalism back in a more focused way. And so that is part of the impetus behind this publication. I'm trying to think in terms of the other components of that. Of course, going back, one of the reasons, the number of media covering the Valley dwindled, something called the internet happened, and I think the internet is obviously a way today that people get news. It's a primary way. And so if someone's looking for particularly daily news, kind of region, national, state, New England, news, people are going to go to their phones. They're going to look online. But I think what we offer here at Today Magazine is we're providing news that people in this community really care about, but that is underreported. And one of the goals I have for Today Magazine is to record the underreported upside of the Farmington Valley community, because again, most of the news that we cover, it's there's too much news going on in Connecticut, nationally. The local TV stations, the Hartford Courant, they're not going to be able to cover the news that Today Magazine covers. And what I hear from people that read the magazine on an ongoing basis is they appreciate our coverage of events that they care about. And they also appreciate that it's a breath of fresh air, because we are looking to report the underreported upside. I think there's a fair critique of media in general. Why so much downside? Why so much negative? And I think you see it in the TV news. I think you see it in the radio news. It seems at the top of every broadcast, there's an assault, there's a homicide, there's a scandal. And what I often say when I talk with local business owners and residents is there's no question when something difficult happens in somebody's life, that is news. I get that. That is important. However, at the same time, there is so much good stuff going on that a lot of these good stories go unreported and underreported. And so when people read Today Magazine, people tell me they appreciate that breath of fresh air, that we're looking to report the good stuff that's going on. And I think it's trying to find that balance, Eric, because it can be very easy for any of us as human beings to look at the downside and to get discouraged, and to, you hear about the coronavirus cases and the this, that, and the other thing, and you get discouraged about it. But there's good stuff going on. And so to try to balance the challenges that we all face with seeing the things we have to be thankful for, I know it's not easy, but I think that's a good human skill that we all can develop and we need to develop, ongoing. And that's one of my goals with the magazine, is that we report that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm to be living in Avon. So you cover several towns in the Farmington Valley. Well, you can name off the towns after I'm done, but your reporting is amazing, and it is all local stories. And I love your phrase, underreported upside, because what you're covering is really the silent, huge majority of people that are out there, and it's just wonderful to read that. And the articles are great, and I know you focus on local stories, and you try and get something in there for each town that you're delivering to also. And you also have a digital edition so that you can go in there and see the archives. But kudos to you, because I love reading your magazine when it gets here.
Thank you, Chip. I really appreciate that. And that's the kind of encouragement that really keeps us going, and so thank you very much. We're covering, in terms of the towns that we cover, we're covering the 5 core towns of the Valley. So starting in the south, that would be Farmington, which is, of course, the namesake of the Farmington Valley. And then, so there's Farmington, then Avon and Canton, Simsbury, and then Granby in the north. So each month, the magazine has a section devoted to each town. Now, we also have, so that's our monthly magazine. And the monthly magazine has been both a print edition and a digital edition since the inception of the magazine. We also have a separate news vehicle that's totally internet focused, and it's called Naturally Today Magazine Online. That's our internet focused. I try to put the emphasis on the right syllable there, but that's our internet focused news vehicle, and that would be comparable to, if you're going to go, if you're a sports fan and you go to ESPN.com, or you're looking to get news, and maybe you go to CBSnews.com or ABC or NBC, whatever it might be. You go to any of these media outlets, they have their headline news section, they've got their feature section. That's our version. Today Magazine Online is the Today Magazine version of that on totally online media focus. And so Today Magazine Online has the quote unquote limitless nature of the internet. There's no limit to the number of words a story can have. There's no limit to the number of stories we can publish, et cetera. Whereas the monthly magazine, like any other print and digital based product, has the space constraint of the print magazine, which is replicated in the digital edition, if that makes sense. So anyway, that's how that works. Chip, just so you know, so the January edition is exclusively digital, and there's a backstory there. But so the print version won't be coming out for January, but we're ramping up our distribution in terms of the digital distribution. So we post our digital edition across all of our social media. We've always been part of LinkedIn and Facebook. The magazine is connected with about 20 different Farmington Valley related Facebook groups, and we're posting on the magazine on those pages and all of our online content. And then we've also recently joined Twitter and Instagram. So we're across all the major social media, and we're ramping up our digital distribution lists, our email list. So we've got a lot going on here as 2021 begins.
Now, you mentioned that you have a focus on positive news, and there's certainly a niche there that needs to be filled. But you've also been able to go back and look at the history of the area. And now, while our listeners will be listening to this after the fact, this is being recorded on Martin Luther King's Jr. birthday. And of course, you had a brilliant story about the time that Martin Luther King spent in Connecticut. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because today, in fact, just within the last hour, and it's actually, I think, ongoing as we speak, there is a special unveiling ceremony for a Martin Luther King in Connecticut memorial that has been installed at the Simsbury Free Library. right on Hop Meadow Street, on the front lawn of the Simsbury Free Library, on Hop Meadow Street in Simsbury. Now, the Simsbury Free Library is not to be confused with the Simsbury Public Library. They're two different locations, but they're like a hop, skip, and jump away from each other on Hop Meadow Street. But in any event, yes, Eric, Martin Luther King, little known fact, it's more well known here in the Valley, but I think many people nationwide don't know this. Martin Luther King Jr. spent 2 teenage summers working in Connecticut with fellow college students. It was a college job to earn money to pay for their college tuition. They came north from Atlanta. He was a student at Morehouse College in Atlanta, came north with about 100 other of his fellow students. They worked at a Coleman Brothers tobacco farm in the north part of Simsbury. That was their summer job. They were earning money to pay for their college tuition back home in Atlanta. For Martin Luther King Jr., it was well, let me back up. About 10 years ago, so the story that I wrote it was a cover story in Today magazine about this memorial. So I wrote a cover story while the students were kind of wrapping up the whole process of getting the memorial in place. And today, so what I started to say a moment ago, today is the unveiling ceremony for that memorial. So it's an incredibly exciting day for the students at Simsbury High, for the town of Simsbury, for everybody really who is connected to and cares about Martin Luther King's legacy. I mean, what a phenomenal legacy he left us, from his leadership of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. And again, what's so amazing is that his time, those 2 summers here in Simsbury, apparently played a pivotal role in his thinking, in his heart, and in his calling that led to his leadership of the civil rights movement. The reason is he wrote letters home to his parents while he was up here those summers. One of those letters, he said, I couldn't believe it. So essentially, this was his first trip in 1944. That was going into his freshman year of college. That was his first trip outside of the segregated South. So he grew up in Atlanta. He went to Morehouse College in Atlanta. This trip that he took with these fellow students, his first trip outside the segregated South. So when they would go to Hartford and go to a restaurant, or they would go to church here in Simsbury, it was their first experience in racially segregated environment, in a restaurant, in a church setting, wherever it might be. And he was just surprised. He wrote home and he said, I could not believe to his parents. I didn't think someone of my race, as I recall how he put it, could sit in the same company of other races. And this is a paraphrase, but to be able to see that kind of racial equality really impacted his view of civil rights. And he also wrote later in his life, at the end of each summer, when they went back south, they took the train. And in DC, apparently, they had to switch train cars to a Jim Crow car. And they were not allowed at that point to be in a racially integrated train car. And so he wrote how that was so difficult for him to go back into the segregated society after experiencing a greater sense of racial equity here in the Farmington Valley. So it's a powerful, powerful story that is really, I think, not especially well known outside here in Connecticut. And so it was an honor to report on that and to see the fruition of it today. As they unveil that memorial, it really is an amazing story.
It really is, and I'm so glad you could bring it to our listeners. Very few people know about the time that Martin Luther King spent up here. I mean, I certainly didn't until your article. So it's really great that we could bring that, especially today, to people.
Yeah, it was a huge eye opener for me too. For the sake of the audience, you do have the editions archived, as you said, and which month's edition was that? And if you could tell people how to access that online, perhaps some people who are listening today can go read that, because that was a huge eye opener for me too, as far as the impact that had on Martin Luther King. I was never aware of that until I read the article. So
yeah, thanks, Chip. Yeah, so yeah, just the easy way to get to it would be to go to our website. It's www.todaypublishing.net. Today Publishing is the overall name of our media outlet. So it's Today Publishing, run together as one word, .net. And then once you get to the homepage, you'll see there's a link for digital editions. Just click the link for other digital editions. That'll take you right to our archive. And it's the August, this cover story, which we were honored to receive an SBJ award for this cover story, is the August 2019 edition of Today Magazine. So August 2019, just go to todaypublishing.net, click the link for other digital editions, and you'll get the August 2019 cover story. And we just late at the end of last week, we posted a more current story in Today Magazine Online, which previews and it previewed and also recapped that information about related to today's ceremony. And so you can also read that story. And that, again, there are links for Today Magazine Online also on the website. So you just go there, and then you're going to find our headline news story that covers today's event. So yeah, so those are two ways to get that information. Thanks for asking about that, Chip.
Fantastic. So you were involved with community reporting for quite a while. You went to ESPN. Now you're back in community reporting. Can you talk a little bit about the differences that you found in community reporting between now and the first time you were involved in it?
Sure. I mean, the first major difference that comes to mind is the internet, and so, when I was working in at Imprint, the Imprint newspaper group 25 years ago, that was not really, that just wasn't part of the deal. It came about, I guess, late 90s is when it became more common that newspapers, newspapers began to post their content online as well. So that's a significant difference. But Eric, I think the principles of reporting, they stay the same. I think whether you're talking about 20th century journalism, 21st century journalism, if you're looking back at history, because really, today's journalism, it's simply, it's essentially synonymous with history, and the history that we read going back, 18th century, 17th century, going back, to whether it's the Roman Empire or Greek, the Greek civilization or ancient Chinese civilizations or whatever, Russia. The principles of reporting and writing about storytelling and history, the principles carry forward. It's a human thing it's a human enterprise that has gone on for centuries, and so we are just looking to carry the baton forward, and so we're reporting again, because we have this local focus, farm to valley, we have this great opportunity to tell so many of these great stories that, again, the local TV stations, WTIC radio, they have too many other stories to report. We have the opportunity and the privilege of reporting, these great stories that are going on here in the Valley. And again, it's different. I think what I'm aiming for is different than what is sometimes called feel-good journalism. I think feel-good journalism has a connotation of being maybe Pollyannish, kind of saccharine, and let's just talk about the good stuff and not even let's pretend that there's nothing bad or difficult happening in the world. Well, obviously that's like, we can't stick our heads in the sand and do that, or we can try, but it's not going to work. So, we're not looking to be Pollyannish. It's not quote unquote feel good journalism in that sense. But we are looking to report the underreported upside. And that upside includes how do we deal constructively with the downside, and that's what I want. That's my goal, with the magazine, is to constructively be part of, reporting and moving forward with a lot of the, again, some difficult topics. I mean, how much more heavy duty a topic is there than civil rights? That's a significant topic from the 60s. Well, going back decades, the 60s is when many strides were made, but fast forward to today, and we know that we need to keep working together as a society to bring about greater equity for everybody. And so I want to be part of that process here with Today Magazine. And so we're, another example, we have had a couple of cover stories in the past couple of years focusing on local World War II veterans. These are, people who were part of that greatest generation, who stepped up at that pivotal time in history, World War II. They're heroes from that greatest generation. So you don't get much more heavy duty a topic than a world war. That is a significant news topic, but we don't look at it just from the perspective of here's how many people died and here's, this, that, and the other thing. But we're looking at it from the perspective of these local heroes who were part of that greatest generation and kind of telling some of their stories. And so that's what we're looking for.
And that's actually so important, because we're at a point where most World War II veterans, they're up in their 80s, 90s, that, they're not going to be with us much longer. And if we don't record their stories, they will be lost to history.
Exactly. And Eric, you mentioned, so that exactly is what's happened in the past couple of years here in the Valley. In June of 2019, we had a cover story. Now, all of the World War II history buffs out there will recognize June of 1944, because that, of course, June 6th was the D-Day, exactly. So June 6th was D-Day. So in June of 2019, we had a cover story that commemorated the 75th anniversary of D-Day. We reported on 3 local World War II veterans, part of that greatest generation. One was a gentleman who had turned 101 that June. And I was able to, so again, talk about an incredible honor. I was able to interview him. I contacted his son. His son was there when we spoke, and a friend of theirs was there as well. A gentleman named John Benjamin. He was a World War II bomber pilot. He won the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is the highest aerial honor that the military awards. He flew several dozen missions and during World War II, and just an amazing story. So we covered him. He actually lived to his 103rd birthday. So I might be misrecalling. He turned 102 the month that we came out with that cover story in June 2019. And then, as I recall, he turned 103 last June 2019. And then he passed, I believe it was later that month. So he died at 103 years old, lived an incredibly full life, served his country with distinction. And like you said, it was our honor to tell some of his story. And so he was just one. Another gentleman from Avon, he was from John Benjamin is from Simsbury. gentleman from Avon named Morton Katz, who also, again, served in World War II. We had a story on him in that June 2019 issue. So anybody who wants to read this cover story, just go to that same link I mentioned, todaypublishing.net, look for the digital edition link, and that would be the June 2019 issue of the magazine. So
Excellent.
Morton Katz, another one. And Morton Katz, Morton Katz turned 101. He was 100 when that story came out, and he's still going strong at 101. So
fantastic. We are hitting the end of our time. So, Bruce, thank you so much for being with us. Chip, what do you think the big takeaway from this episode is?
Underreported upside. It's just a breath of fresh air to be reading positive community news. And the bottom line is, out there, all of you listeners, the world is 99% positive once you look for the people doing it. So it's just wonderful that you are doing that. And if you are listening from around the country and you can look up your local online newspapers or whatever, that's great. A really funny side story. I actually met Morton Katz because he was a member of the Avon Chamber of Commerce, and he's a lawyer, and he always did his commercial holding up his pen and saying, before you sign anything, this is a deadly weapon. See your lawyer. That's how we started his commercials. Last time I saw him was 2 years ago. But Bruce, keep it up. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Chip. Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate the invitation to be here. Thank you again.
And we're glad to have had you. Yeah, I think the big takeaway for this is that even though a story can be serious, there is an upside. It's all in your point of view. You can always find positive information in any story. You just have to pay attention to it. So please do so. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts. You can also find us on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better.